This is the Unsweetened Truth with Kristen Pucci, where we talk about everything but don't sugarcoat anything. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Kristen Pucci with the Unsweetened Truth. Today we have a very special guest that I'm excited to introduce to everyone. My father, my dad, Papa Pooch, all the above. So I wanted to invite him to today's podcast because little backstory on my dad. But before we do that, I want you to kind of just say who you are, why you're here, and I'll intro you in.
Okay, I'm your dad.
This will be fun.
State my name.
There
Steve
you go.
Pucci.
Your social security number?
No, I'll pass on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Why am I here?
Yeah, why are you here, and what do you do for work?
I think, as we deal with a lot of different companies, particularly some of the smaller companies, I get a kick out of how companies react when they see that your dad is working for you. And some people laugh. Some people, I'm not sure I could do that. Other people say, oh, I think that would be the greatest thing. And I guess when you were talking to me about maybe we should do a podcast on this, it's sort of like some of the things that we've experienced, some of the things we've learned about this process of working together, how do families work together, might be an interesting topic to share with the crowd.
I agree. And so for all of you that do not know, so Steve is obviously my dad, and he is our CFO and our COO here at Cray. So you started working with us how long ago?
January, right? 2022?
Okay. So almost
Officially.
2 years. Yeah. So officially, yeah, we were.
I've worked for you for my entire life.
Yeah,
What do you mean?
That's true. Officially getting paid.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay,
getting
there we
paid
go.
with a paycheck.
January 2022.
There we
Okay.
go. So about 2 years now. And it's kind of a funny story. So he was working a lot in supply chain and other worlds. And you were kind of just, what do you want to do next? You were kind of thinking about the next thing that you wanted to do. And we started talking. And I needed somebody in the role that you were considering. And I think you probably, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, kind of why it was maybe attractive to you, or maybe it wasn't, and I just forced you. I just forced you to, and you couldn't tell me no. But
Actually, I wanted to retire, but then Kristen said, "Hey, well, you could come help me."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not like work, is it?
No, not at all.
Right.
It's got to be different though, a bit than what you're doing before, right? Like it's probably more or less stressful. I don't know.
You remember as the worldwide supply chain director, particularly over the COVID pandemic, that was a 24/7 thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I guess I wouldn't say stress, but just every single day was a different need and a different issue. And, when you do it long enough, you can deal with it. I mean, it's stressful at the time, but you deal with it.
Yeah.
But I think, I think everybody does this as they get older. And, you start thinking about what do you want to do next?
Mm-hmm.
Retiring and sitting in the house and watching TV or something like that just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I like being outside. I like doing different things. And so this whole new area called Cray Consulting and marketing and social media, interesting topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so here I am.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too, talking with some of my other CEO friends. They talk about like some aren't quite there yet, but when they do want to get into retirement, so many of them seem to want to go to that consulting route. Like they want to not stop what they're doing currently, but they want to do it on their terms less frequently, so that way they can still kind of be flexing those muscles still, but also be doing more things that they enjoy and kind of have a little bit more boundaries with it. So I don't know if that.
Well, anybody that's, again, I don't know what the purpose, here, if we want to kind of what worked for us, what people ought to consider that I'm learning sort of the hard way by actually living it right now and going through this transition. I mean, when people think about retiring, and it's amazing how fast it comes, okay, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Maybe that's another podcast episode.
And, going cold turkey from working full time to a quote retirement lifestyle can be pretty tough, pretty stressful. And I guess I think about it as maybe doing it through a transition.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a way that you can transition into a retirement lifestyle that works for everybody?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess I'm working on it, right?
Yeah, we're figuring out as we go. But in the midst of figuring out, obviously you're working with me. And I think today our podcast topic is we just want to unpack what it's like for family to work together. And the reason why we want to talk about this, I think, is one, it's very common, but I feel like it's more common that the daughter works for the dad versus the dad working for the daughter. So I think that's an interesting dynamic. Family dynamics in general are really interesting, but I think the fact that that's flipped is also really challenging in its own ways, pros and cons. But I also think too, just that dynamic of coming and working together and just what that looks like. So I want to unpack that with you today.
All right.
So I don't really know which direction I want to go in, but I'm thinking let's maybe start as like where we started. I'm thinking I want to talk about just where we started and what that was like and maybe how we got to where we are now. That's where I feel like I could start well.
All
so
right.
I remember when you first started working with us, we kind of had that role for you of, even though it was CFO, COO, that made sense because of what you were doing prior. That's where your skills lie. But there was definitely an element of you doing kind of everything and anything that you could kind of help me with, right? Like there was a little bit of a dynamic, and I think we did that wrong. That's where I'm going to start with. I think we did that wrong because, and you tell me if any of this sits with you. I think the dynamic of why, because we struggled too. I'm going to tell everyone this at the beginning. We struggled when we first started working with each other. We probably fought weekly.
Yeah.
It would get heated.
Was it fighting?
It was conflict. We had conflict.
Italian arguments.
We had passionate
Italian arguments.
We had passionate conflict. It was to what others would see as fighting, I would say.
Sure.
And so there would be times that I had to be like, hey, other employees, get off the call. We need to figure this out, because it was something that couldn't go unaddressed, but we really like locked horns. I would say there was a lot of times that we very much so locked horns, and maybe that's the Italian culture. I don't know what it was, but we locked horns a lot of time, I think. And like neither one of us were really going to like give it up for a bit. And I think unless you have something you want to say there.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just think when we first started working together, what I feel like I got wrong and what we got wrong was not taking into account enough of the fact of the dynamic of father and daughter and being so focused on the dynamic of employee and employer. Because I think what I did was I separated that. I think that was easier for me in a sense than it was, I think, for you to start. Because I just remember feeling like you wanted to help me with anything because I was your daughter.
Right.
Anything that you could help me with, you were like, I want to do it. However, I think there was also a dynamic though, because you were in a whole new arena, right? Like I remember when we were trying to get you to pick like a chapstick flavor. Do you remember that? And it was creative.
The promo line.
Yes. It was a creative thing that was just like, I was like, Dad, just pick a damn chapstick flavor. And you were like, I don't know what to do. And I don't think I had enough of an appreciation for how your brain works and how you work, and to see that is not a good question to ask you. But a good question is this. And so I would ask you that, and then I'd get frustrated by the fact that you couldn't come to me with an answer when you're thinking about everything from like a numbers and a statistics and all the things that I hate. You're thinking about all those things, and I'm like, just tell me what flavor you want.
Yeah.
And I think what happened was you didn't want to let your daughter down, and I was like, why can't you just give me a damn chapstick flavor? And I think when we realigned you to be right exactly where you excel, which is numbers and legals.
Knowing your lane.
Exactly. And I think once we got you in that lane, that's where I realized, at least for me, it felt like the horns were unlocked. I appreciated you for where you were in your lane. You appreciated me for my lane, and we just didn't cross into each other's lane anymore. So you kind of speak to that.
Yeah, but I guess you got to sit back and think about the dynamics involved, right? I guess any family working together, the dynamics involved. You've got how many years before you start doing business together, right? We had
27 or 28
years.
yeah.
Okay. Obviously, I'm the father, you're the daughter, and as a parent, there's a role to play as a parent. And, what's your number one role as a parent? Teach your child how to grow up, how to be able to live on their own, and keep them safe, right? So I don't care whether it's business or anything else, right? You're going to keep somebody safe. But, the interesting thing is when you look at the way you are and your characteristics and the way I am and my characteristics, I don't know whether it's genetic, whether it's just this is what I've been doing the last 30 some odd years, whether I'm an engineer by degree. It's facts, it's process, it's, we talk, what are the facts? What does it mean? What do you do about it? Well, and then you deal with artistic, creative,
visionary thinkers,
visionary types of discussions or questions. And it's like the two don't jive, so to speak, right? And so if you want to ask me what the square root of 327 is, well, that's easy. If you want me to say, well, what color chapstick do you want or what flavor, now I'm stuck. What do you want me to do?
Which is so crazy to me.
What do you want me to do?
Which is so funny because I see the problem, like that math problem. I have no idea.
So, when you talk about the roles and responsibilities, coming back to family working together, there better be, again, maybe this is the learning from this, right? There better be some clear role and responsibilities defined for each individual. I don't care whether it's, family working together or anybody, because if you don't have that, particularly in a family, then the family dynamics start kicking into gear.
Yep.
And as the father in the family dynamics, well, guess what?
Yeah.
I'm going to protect you. When I see something going on within this business and some, I'll just say, interesting person at some construction company wishes to say some comment or something to my daughter, guess what Dad's going to do?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And now I got my daughter saying, Dad, no, you're not going to do anything here.
And then you got Dad being like,
okay, daughter, you can help. You go ahead and solve this one, and we'll see how it goes.
And if not, I'll take care of it.
And then whether it's the financial area,
Yeah.
that's just what's going to play out. So,
which I think is good, though.
Exactly. Just what's your lane?
Yeah.
What's the responsibilities? And I trust that you've got this, and you trust that I've got that, and we'll communicate and discuss things as we see fit.
I think that protective piece is really important, though, because I think that's something that in the beginning we struggled trying to figure that out, because like me being the boss, that realistically is my job in my role of the company is I protect the company, right? I protect the employees. I protect everyone here, including you. So now that dynamic is flipped. However, you're used to that being your dynamic for me. Plus we have your girl dad. So you have that dynamic also on the other employees. So I think that's like a really interesting thing probably for you to navigate. But I would say that we have a better way of handling that now. Before I'd be like, Dad, just relax. Like I got it. Like whatever. Now I see that I will handle it up into a certain point.
Yeah.
And then I'm like,
Dad, you got this one.
You go handle it. But it's not Dad, go handle it, right? Like you and I are talking like, all right, I give you a wink, but you go, all right, I got this. And then it's like, I'm sure from the outside, someone can maybe go, oh, who's Steve Pucci? Is it her dad? Is it her uncle? Is it? Because obviously we have the same last name, right? Like no one really knows who you are per se, unless they really follow me on social media or they follow the story. But they're probably like, who is this individual? But that's like, once he contacts you, have fun. Have fun when he contacts you. Because my approach is a little different.
Yeah. Well, think of the dynamic that we had to deal with. And I'm sure a lot of, I'll just say, young girls running a company, young women, right? Think about this. We go into a client meeting. They don't know who we are. They see you and they say me and they see our last names and they say, oh, who's this? Oh, this is my dad. And immediately the assumption is that he's running the company. And so in these discussions, they're looking at me looking for guidance and answers and things. And it's like, guys, you're looking at the wrong person here, right? And sort of, you sort of look at this as, think of the dynamic, the stereotype involved in this, where the assumption that's out there is that, well, if any key decision or something needs to be made, well, we're going to ask the dad. Like, wait a minute, guys. Think about what we had to do, just in sort of not directly, but guiding them back to where the role and responsibility is and who's the decision maker here, right? You want to ask me for some advice? Sure, no problem. You want to talk about one of the decisions for Cray? You're talking to the wrong person here, guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Kind of interesting.
Which is good, though, that we have that boundary and you have that respect, too, for me, though, that because I don't think there's some dads out there that would probably enjoy being the one making that decision or struggle with, or trusting that your daughter can handle it.
Your daughter or son or whatever handle it, even though they may be young, they need to handle it. And maybe they don't know how to do it. They'll learn. They'll figure, what's my favorite saying to all of you guys?
You have a lot of sayings.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't need to figure it out for you. You'll figure it out. And then how are you going to learn about it, right? That's the best way to learn about it.
Yeah.
If I just solve it for you, come on.
Yeah. Right? No, I agree with you. I think that's
And it
good.
works in business too.
Yeah. So what have been what have been things that on your end that I may or may not know about that have been kind of like pieces throughout the puzzle that you've been working through that maybe were challenging at one period of time that you're like, is there anything, I guess what I'm asking, is there anything that you had to like do in your head to like make this successful? Like things that you had to either change for yourself or pivot? Because I have a couple that I can think of.
There's a few.
Yeah.
And I guess, and maybe again, I come back to maybe it's just the way I am. Maybe it's the engineer. Maybe it's the thinking and my way of doing things. It's a very sort of fact-based, there's a right and a wrong answer, right? There is a right solution. And when you're dealing with more visionary, creative, it's ideas. It's not looking for the exact thing. I can remember one time it was just simply as, hey, we're going to get together on Friday for a discussion on this. Okay. So my brain works as, okay, well, we have a schedule. We've got timelines. We've got X, Y, Z, operations, processes. What time is that? Well, it's sometime on Friday. Well, okay, but what time is it?
Oh, I do remember this, yeah.
It's like, well, sometime before, and it just doesn't compute
Made
for
your
me.
brain, yeah.
Because it's like, no, it's a fixed time. It's 9 o'clock, it's 11 o'clock, it's 3 o'clock. What? So I think for me, it's, things aren't as rigid. And I don't know.
They're very fluid. I feel like at a creative, it's very...
There's a lot of things moving around. There's it's sort of the same as, I call it the text message communicating. And maybe this is a generational thing, but I guess inherently, I don't really like text messages, right? Inherently.
Yeah.
And when you get text messages that one right after the other, it's a single word, 2 words, boom, boom, boom. It's like, what is this? 15, 20 text messages. I used to have a protocol that says if this email goes back and forth more than 2 times, we're going to be on a phone call talking.
That I don't hate. I hate email.
And it's like, they're getting used to what I call the text message communication and trying to interpret what text message communication is actually asking for is a challenge for me, right? I guess I'm getting better at it, right?
Yeah. I would say that, but also the amount of communication too. Because like, I remember us being in that one meeting that we were talking about DISC. Remember that when we all as a company had it and like we found out that I'm like a high D.
Oh.
Carolyn was more of an I. I think Gina, you spelled DISC, D-I-S-C, because Gina was like an S, and then you were a C, which was interesting because you're very like data oriented and whatever. Right. And I am very like just quick, short, straight to the point. Versus you really like to include a lot of information. You like to include everything in it, and I
know what's coming.
Correct.
Here, let's give it to you all the first time.
Yeah, you give me everything, which like works very much for how your brain works and how yours, but then I look at that email being a D and I'm like, I'm not going to read past the first sentence. And so I think just that was really, I think that was a major pivotal time too, when we all kind of learn about each other's personality styles a little bit more, and how somebody might take a little bit more of an emotional approach, or somebody might take a little bit more of a data approach. And that part I think was super interesting. So just kind of like, cause I'm like, hey, I can't, and me setting that boundary, I think too was interesting,
Yeah.
because I would be like, hey, I know that you could talk about this data and this math for 45 minutes, but my brain can probably handle about 5. And that doesn't mean that the data is not important. And that doesn't mean that what you're delivering to me isn't good or isn't important. But because of how my brain thinks, that's like me talking about chapstick colors with you for 45 minutes. And you're just like, oh my God. Like, it make your brain want to explode. It makes my brain want to explode talking about numbers.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting.
But I think that's another part you kind of say to learning. But, you know, I think it's utilizing each other's strengths maybe that, you know, we can talk about finances and numbers and, you know, all of that. And I know there's a lot of that it's important to you, but you're not going to spend a lot of time on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, again, as we were talking about, is knowing your lane, what your roles and responsibilities are. So you know that I've got the financials and some of the processes and things. Mm-hmm. And if there's something that pops up that we need to talk about, great, we will.
Yeah.
And maybe that's, you know, again, the plus and the minus of family members working together is, you know, there's an inherent trust.
Yeah.
That when you think about a small business, and obviously the financials are very important because, right, this is how a lot of small businesses fail. They don't get the financial part right. And you have to, if you're not, if you don't have the interest or the desire to look at the details of the financial information, you better have somebody that you can trust that is going to be doing that and making sure that things are working the way they should. Yes. Particularly with that small company. Yes. And I think there's one of the pluses when you think about it is family members working together. I just say our family members working. There's an inherent trust there that there is no concern that I have that you're going to take care of this, and there's no concern that you have that I'm going to take care of that. Right? Yep. Something comes up. Obviously, I had to educate you on a few things, right? We won't get into details, but I think it's worked.
Yeah. No, and I think like there's a respect now for understanding those things that we bring to the table, because when I'm looking at numbers, I'm looking at everything from like, I don't want to get into the but you like that. Like that makes everything make sense for you, versus for me, I'm like, I just need to know the top numbers and the top line, because then I can make a decision from that number, which is what I'm thinking about from my vantage point, versus yours is like, the number has to be correct or whatever. And I'm thinking about what do I have to do from that data point. Correct. And so I think that's really interesting. But he has a great point that I definitely would recommend to any business owner. If you're even remotely like me that hates math, hates the money, like I couldn't even tell you what's in our bank account right now, nor am I going to say it on the podcast, but I have no idea what's in it. And I don't care to know what's in it from a standpoint of the details. I do need to know that we have money. I do need to know that there's enough of it. I do need to know how much are we spending versus how much we're making. I do need to know that. I need to know the strategy behind when are we going to buy and purchase? What are we planning on doing in X number of period of time? Like that's what I need to know at the business owner level. And if you aren't someone that knows that about your business, I can tell you that it gives you such a security and a peace of mind not being a numbers person, having a numbers person. So whether that's a bookkeeper or a fractional CFO or an accountant or whatever it is, somebody who can play that role for you that you really trust to have access to your money, because not everybody has a Steve. Even if there's their own dad, maybe they don't even trust their own dad, right? Like there's people who don't trust each other in family dynamics. And so I would say, please, please, please make sure that you have someone watching your money. Because if you don't have an interest, you are just going to put it aside. You're not going to think about it, and it's going to cause some issues.
And people are happy to take your money, right?
Oh,
of course
they love it.
Right?
I think something I wanted to say, think of something else that I know that I changed was I know when I first started, called you, and I don't know if you've noticed that I've done this, but I used to call you Steve all the time.
Yep.
And now I call you Dad.
Yep.
And I think in our family, even with like dating or whatever, if I brought a guy, they would call you Mr. Pucci. We never had that dynamic as a family that you were Steve, and it was like it was Mr. and Mrs. Pucci. Mm-hmm. It was not Steve and Debbie. And I think that was a difficult transition as well initially. I think subconsciously, I think it was really difficult being called Steve versus Dad. So now I've kind of dialed that back a bit, and in front of clients, you're Steve, but internally and when we're kind of just discussing whatever, it's Dad. Because I think as well with the story that you told is that if I was to say Dad in a meeting with, who knows, a client, a big client, there's an element of respect, I feel like, that I potentially am losing by being like, hey, Dad, like, what do you think? You know, I hear it a certain way. And that could be my own thing. But I think that there's an element to that versus Steve, can you speak to that? Or can you tell us about it? Versus like, hey, Dad, can you know, it sounds different.
Yeah.
So I think that is a switch that I've specifically made to make sure, because I kind of saw how that was affecting things a bit. And I think that's good. There's nothing wrong with me calling you Dad during the workday. And I think I initially first thought that there really was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
All right. You agree with that?
I do.
That was easy.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an easy one.
I'm trying to think what else. Mostly that swimming lane thing was huge. What else? What other topics do you have? What other do you want to talk about?
Well, you know, I guess, and it's been, I think, easier for me. It's sort of who's the boss and the roles and responsibilities, right? It has to be understood. Because if you're going into particularly a family, you know, business with family members, it better be clear, because it's sort of, it'll revert back to what the family dynamics are.
Yes, that
right?
was a great point that you made.
And it's whether it's making decisions, whether it's solving a particular problem, whatever it may be, it sort of then falters back to whatever the dynamics were in the family. And I guess for me, it's been a little easier that it's simple to me on who the boss is and who's supposed to be, you know, who's doing the decisions, who's supposed to be doing X, Y, Z, you know, roles and responsibilities. It's very clear for us.
Yeah.
Externally, it may not be that clear, which is fine. And as it comes up, we address it.
Yeah.
But I think that's been very helpful.
I would agree. Can I say something to that?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because this is a good example of like from a daughter's perspective, because we've had like a very traditional, I would say, upbringing for the most part. Like we had very traditional, like you very much so honored your mom and your dad and all that. And I remember, and I still catch myself sometimes doing this now, not so much before, but I definitely want your, oh my God, what is the term I'm thinking of? I want like your blessing on things sometimes, which is funny because I remember my first major decision I had to make as adult Kristen Pucci, that I had to make a call without, and it was the first time you ever said it to me. I don't know if you remember this, when I got my Mazda, when I got my first car. And I remember being like, I need to call my dad. I need to see what he says. And it's like, your dad has absolutely nothing to do with this car. Like it was my first car that I had to buy with my money, with my whatever. And I remember being at night at the Mazda dealership being like, nope, I need him to just say that it's okay. And then I'm making the right decision. I need him to do that. And I remember, because I had the guy I was dating at the time with me with the car. And he's like, why do you need your dad? Now he was not kind. So that could have been his own thing. But like, I remember so much so just needing you to be like, yeah, I think you're making the right choice. I think this is like a good thing. And I find myself sometimes in uncertainty now still doing that, because I think that's the dynamic of the father-daughter, is that you want the, I think you're going the right direction with this or whatever. Because this is my first time doing this all the time as well.
I think what's interesting here, because again, whether it's father-daughter, as the CEO, you've got to have people that you can bounce ideas off of and get acknowledgement or discussion on some decisions that you're making. So,
Yeah.
I guess it just works out nicely that, you've got one that you can inherently trust for anything and have any discussion about anything. And you're going to hear an honest response,
Yeah.
right? It's not somebody that, they're going to tell a CEO what they want to know or what they want to hear. And you've told me before that, Dad, I'll take care of this. You didn't want to hear it, but you heard it anyway. But it's like, I got this. Yeah. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I would say, unless you want to talk more about dynamics, because I want to make a note of something.
Well, I think we touched on, the roles, responsibilities, the staying in your lane, the stereotypes you got to deal with. You've got to deal with the stereotypes, because I don't care whether it's a mother, son, a sister, a brother, a father, a daughter. If family members are working together, inherently there's going to be stereotypes drawn.
Sure.
And be prepared for it, right?
I don't feel like have you noticed that? I must not notice that as much. Do you see that from your angle?
Well, I guess we've seen a few examples that have come up.
Oh, okay.
Where
give examples.
Let me talk
Don't
to
be
you,
like,
let me talk to your dad.
Oh.
Right?
We did get that in
All
an
of a
email.
sudden,
He was trying to be an asshole.
Some
though.
key decision needed to be made, and can I have your father's number and let me talk to
Got
your dad?
it. Okay,
I'm
so
like,
that's actually an interesting point.
Interesting thing. What do you want to talk to me? Are you sure you want to talk to me? Because I know what I'm going to say if you talk to me, right? I think you're better off talking to her.
That's actually a really good point. So that was an email exchange with an asshole client that he used the dynamic to
He tried
to use the dynamic to belittle me.
Right.
And to kind of cut me at my knees.
Right.
And be like, can I talk to your dad? Because he might be a little bit better at making a decision on this than you. I do. That was, I forgot because it pissed me off so little.
But I would have loved to talk to him.
Oh,
no
sure.
problem.
Yeah. Because then he doesn't think about what that actually means, right? Like he's probably thinking that's going to make me go, oh, he's going to go talk to my dad. When to me, I'm like, go for it. Have fun. Have fun. And then you can come back and talk to me and go, yeah, I probably shouldn't have talked to your dad.
Because I know what I'm going to deal with.
Oh, sure.
What are the facts?
Sure.
What does it mean? And what
You're
are we
going to
piss
piss them
about
off
it?
with logic.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you don't have any common sense or anything about what your opinions versus facts, guess what? We're not going to get too far.
Nope.
Right?
That's a good point. I forgot about that.
It was kind of funny, wasn't it?
That was what it did.
But that was an example.
Yeah.
How about the other scenario, right? And again, this is the stereotype. So you've got a young woman running a company, and we're dealing in the construction industry. Mm-hmm. Now, what do you think is going to happen in the construction, and I'm sure in many other industries as well, but what's going to happen sooner or later, right? Now, as your dad, what do I do in this situation? Because potentially they're a client.
Well, let's unpack that further because some people might not be able to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
I know a specific exact circumstance. So what he is talking about is that when you're a female, and as many as the females listening to this will know, when you work in a male-dominated industry, it will happen more than once that people will hit on you and make advances towards you, and they won't be quiet. They'll be quite loud, and there was a circumstance that happened with a client, and he practically did he send it through he sent it through an Instagram DM, didn't he? Was it an Instagram DM? Was it who sent me that? Wasn't it through an Instagram DM that he sent me the thing that he was going to buy me tickets and send me out to California? Wasn't that through any? Okay, great. So that there was a client that we were sending a proposal
reply to. That message.
Yeah, literally. But there was a client that we were going to send a proposal to, which was like 3 companies or whatever, and he wanted to work with us. And I sent, I got everything together. We were working on getting it together. And then I remember he sent me an Instagram DM that was incredibly inappropriate. This is someone that is married and has children, okay? I know this to be about them because they also have them in their profile photo. And he sends me a message pretty much saying that he gets lonely on business trips and he wants to send me out to California to spend time with him. And I remember with you...
Dad, deal with that one.
Well, sure. But I remember even being uncomfortable having to tell you what
Yeah.
happened because of that dynamic versus I would tell the girls no problem, be like, can you believe what
Right.
happened? But
Right.
then you asked me because I was like, nope, we're not going after this client anymore. And that was that was going to be a pretty big client. And I remember you asked me specifically what happened, and how awkward and uncomfortable is that you have to like talk to your dad and explain to them how this like gross guy DM'd you on Instagram and made this advance, which is super uncomfortable. And I remember hearing your reaction to it and whatever. And you have ways that you want to deal with it, but I think it's opened I think it's also too, for the better, has opened up your eyes as to what it's like
Yeah.
for a female working in a male dominated world too, or just in general. I think just in business in general, and I have no idea what it's like to be obviously a guy, but I think it's probably been pretty eye opening for you to see.
Yeah. And I guess from the positive sense here, I mean, when you thinking about retiring, obviously getting up there in age, and having the ability to work with your daughter and the younger generation, right? Now, obviously we're expanding and we've got all kinds of people now, but it's when you look at what they think about in doing the stuff that we do in the business sense, and it's just different.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, the meshing of, I call it the old and the young, on how these things are coming together, because what I find, and I'm learning about this, what I find is, some of the old ways are still the best way. But some of these new ways, they're not too bad. They work out pretty slick. This social media thing, hey, it's kind of interesting. Marketing a company, social media, oh my goodness. I mean, if I knew 10 years ago how to do the things that you're able to do, I mean, supply chain would have been simple.
Oh,
It would have been easy.
sourcing and everything. Yeah. Can't even
Sourcing,
imagine.
oh my goodness. It
Selecting
would have been
people to work
simple.
with.
Recruiting, oh my goodness. This stuff would have been simple, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of like, 20 years ago, we had to travel to a different place to literally even talk with anybody, so to speak, right? To see them. Today, you get on a little video call and it's like you're right there. This
Or
traveling
you don't
stuff,
even have to
wow.
get on a call with them,
Yeah.
and they just see it because you're posting about it.
Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah.
new and old coming together.
No, I love that.
I think it works out pretty nice.
I think there's a major positive that I would like to spin for other people if they do currently work with their family, that there's probably certain people that are really difficult to work with. But I would say, and maybe you'd agree, if not, that's okay. I would say working together has made our personal and professional relationship better.
Yeah,
Would you agree?
I would.
And I'm going to say my reason why I think so, and then I want to hear yours. My reason why I think it made us stronger is we've been through so much over the last however many years that you have gone to bat for me and like been that person that I'm like, I can't do it. If I deal with this anymore, it's not going to be good. So I give it to you and then you handle it. There is something for just women in general, not even if it's their dad, but if there's like, when you give something to someone and then they handle it and then they take care of it and then they just deal with it for you, that just feels so good. There's something about that just feels so, so good. So when it's then your dad, I just feel like there's a relationship that you and I have now that like, there's just that inherent trust of like, you and I are locked, that it's like, you know what? Try to send us that email. Try to send something in an email being like, I want to talk to your dad. You know what? Go for it. And I'm going to be on speaker and we're going to be talking to you to get like, there's just that dynamic that we did not have before. I would say we did, but like now it is just, you can't negotiate it. You can't argue that. I don't feel as though, I know you will always have my back. You will always be there. You will always step up for me in every single way that I ever need. You're like solving every problem. There's all this protection. Like, and even if it's not physically protecting me, right? As you would when I was young and when I was little and you had to physically care for me in all of those ways, you do it now in protecting my reputation and protecting my money and protecting my employees. I think that has been completely priceless for me, and maybe something that if someone's really struggling at another company with their family, that like, I really am going to challenge you to push through it, but you need to take into account the family dynamics, the generational stuff that's occurring, the emotional awareness of both yourself and your parent. Like, you can't pretend like any of that is not very real, and that is influencing the decisions that they're making, or the way that they're talking to you, or the way that, like, you don't know. And maybe there was times that, like, you kind of like tweaked, like had a flashback that you're like, I need to be the dad right now. I need to make the
sometimes you can't separate it.
Well, yeah, sometimes you can't separate it.
Separating the dad from the COO, CFO, unfortunately, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think if you, as the kid, like, or the child, or the whatever, working with your parents, I think you just need to accept that. Like, you can't change, and you shouldn't really want to change them, but you can't change them. Just realize the decisions and the environments that really maybe trigger the parent or trigger the person or make them uncomfortable. Try to manage that and avoid those, but you also can't tiptoe around them at the same time. Because we also have had really interesting conversations as well about how we communicate, and how I'm like, I'm hearing it like this.
Right.
Do you, like, we just had one the other day when you were like, and it's Italian thing, like, you get passionate, you get loud. And I'm like, you're yelling.
You're not hearing what I'm
like,
saying.
You're yelling. And you're like, I'm not yelling. And I'm like, Dad, your octaves are like 10 times higher than how you usually talk. And you're like, I'm not yelling. And I'm like, yes, you are. But I think what I said after, and I realized it kind of like woke you up a little bit from your little passionate thing that you were having, was that I was just like, hey, it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. It makes it sound like you're yelling. And then you were like, okay, that does make sense. And then you kind of went down 5 octaves, but I don't know if you have anything on that.
No, you got it.
Yeah.
You got it. Mm-hmm. But you know what you're saying, and you're going to hear something I've said many times before, right? The forming, storming, norming, performing. Okay. Now, anyone who doesn't know what this is, I'll just say the 4 stages that anybody, any individual, I don't care who it is, any company, any employees that get together to do something. Okay, so whether we come together, working together at a company, a new employee comes on at a company, a new client. I don't care if it's a personal thing. I don't care if it's a business thing. I'm just going to describe it as forming, storming, norming, performing.
It's any time 2 things come together in a new relationship of some type.
Anything.
Yes.
So even when they say family gets together working, you are going to go through these 4 stages.
In that order.
It is a given. And anybody who thinks they're not is kidding themselves. And it's not a bad thing that you go through these stages, because you have to go through these stages in order to get to the performing stage, right? And I guess the key thing is, are you willing to accept the forming, storming, and be able to work through it, as you just said before, understanding what is the issue, why is it a problem, why are we Italian arguing about this, whatever it may be, the sooner you can deal with that, the quicker you'll get through it. In this forming, storming, norming, performing system model, let's call it. People think that, it's family members. That's not going to happen. Or I know this company, I've worked for this company, or I know people that work for this company. No, we're not going to do that, right? We work well together as a team. Well, I just tell you that's BS. It's going to happen. Everybody, every individual, every company, you are going to go through, when you throw people together and expect them to accomplish some task, some project, or some business working together, you're going to go through the forming, storming, norming. And so the key becomes, how do we expect it? We know it's going to happen. When it happens, what do you do about it, right? And how do you minimize the amount of time that you get stuck in the forming, storming phase?
Sure.
Right? And I kind of say we went through it as well. Now, they also say, from, again, experience and past information and things, that it typically takes 6 to 12 months. Now, again,
6 to 12 months to get through the whole process?
Well, to get through forming, storming, learning curve, getting to know somebody, how they work, how does a team start to really jive and start executing?
Yeah.
6 to 12 months to do that. Okay. Now, of course, there'll be plenty of people out there that'll say, no, it's not going to take that long.
Me included.
It's only going to take a month. Oh, I know this coming. No, it's not. Well, I hate to tell you, right? Yeah. Now, maybe this is wisdom, right? Maybe this is knowledge from the last 40 or 50 years. It's going to happen, right? Now, how do you get through it? How do you recognize it when it happens? And how do you get through it as quick as possible? I guess, it's for us. Well, what we were in it, right?
Yeah,
Would you call it storming? I don't know.
Yeah.
Italian arguing.
We were storming.
A few examples.
We're having an Italian storm.
Few examples. No big deal.
Yeah.
Right? Few examples.
It's not bad.
So, yeah.
I think you don't want to, I think a point that we want to make with this, though, is that you don't want to avoid. So many people try to avoid conflict in all areas of their life.
Yeah.
At work, with their friends, with their significant other, with just themselves even. Like, people try so desperately to avoid conflict because
it's not going to happen.
Well, it's one, it's not going to happen, but two, conflict is not bad. The conflict that you're worried about, this person, right? And this is my millions of years of therapy talking. The conflict that person is worried about, that they're avoiding, is not the conflict that hasn't happened yet. It's the conflict that's already happened. It's their conflict of their parents when they were younger. It's a conflict of a fight they had with an ex-boyfriend, with a friend, with a sibling, with whatever. Okay. That's where they learned their definition of conflict. Yeah. So that's why they avoid this conflict. The issue is that they're assuming everyone handles conflict the same in the way to which they've experienced. So you can't do that, because if you avoid it, it's not going to solve itself. It's not going to go away. It's just, it's going to like surface in
and
another.
It sits behind. Nobody talks about it, but they're all thinking about it behind the scenes and everything, and it's affecting the work.
Or that's when drama
occurs.
Occurs. Yeah, because then if like someone finds a common enemy, right? Let's say Jan at work has really pissed people off in a meeting, and then two people on the side are like, oh, wasn't Jan a real piece of work or whatever? You can see how that drama just grows when it's like, let's just talk to Jan. Let's talk to Jan. Yeah. So let's talk about maybe that storming piece with family dynamics and how to kind of maybe work through that storming part.
Well, I mean, a few immediate examples come to mind is, one is when you start arguing about something, maybe it's time to take a time out. Mm-hmm. And hey, okay, we obviously disagree on this particular thing, and let's take a time out, and we'll come back to this discussion after we've thought about it overnight. Yeah. Right? Because that's one way.
Yeah. You can't discount in a family. And I think this is interesting too, because I know we're going to talk about working with friends. Like, you can't eliminate and pretend that it's not real, that you have more emotions riding on the relationship than other people do.
Right.
Right? Because you're more emotionally invested in the relationship than just owner CFO.
Yeah.
Of course you care about your employees, and but it's different when it's your daughter,
right?
And it's different when it's your dad. And things could be communicated as, I'm just trying to tell you that you're wrong with this or whatever, but it also could be all this other stuff that's coming out at the same, that could be related to the dynamics that you're talking about that are coming out in this conflict, when it's like, okay, I didn't realize that and kids are a big thing too. If you have like secret resentment towards your parents and then you try to start working with them.
Uh-oh. Do you have secret resentment towards your parents?
Sorry. That's why I brought you on here. I want to talk about it now.
Geez, you're putting me on the spot here.
But no, I just think, if you have, they will come out. If you have, if your stuff has not been,
they'll come out one way or the other if you're working together.
Exactly. And I think things can like shift a certain way. So that would be a tip that I would maybe recommend to people, that like, if you have other things that outside of work you want to work on with your family, I think you should try to work through those, because they will come out in your professional work, and it will be in how you communicate with each other, how you treat each other, how you work through things, how you don't work through things like that. You'll see that happen.
Yeah. I mean, and I come back again to defined roles and responsibilities. And for me, who's the boss?
Yeah.
Well, if that's clear, and ultimately you may not like what I'm suggesting or the solution or whatever it is, it's your decision. Mm-hmm. Now, whether you're making the right decision or the wrong decision, that remains to be seen. It's still
my decision.
It's your decision. Mm-hmm. And, maybe it's a learning experience. Maybe it's hey, you were right. Mm-hmm. Right. But if you know your role, and I mean, that can help,
Yeah.
minimize what I'll call some of the storming aspect, because sometimes people like to play in somebody else's sandbox, right? And at work, that's great for some ideas and brainstorming and things like that. But when ultimately it comes to time to make a decision, well, whose responsibility is it, and who's going to be held accountable for it?
Yeah.
Right. I think there's another way here too. Is you've got to have a good network of people that you can talk to about things.
Sure.
Even CFOs and CEOs, right? Because we don't have all the answers. And when we get into a storming situation, somebody may think, well, I know the answer to this. Well, maybe not, right? And having others that you can reach out to, that maybe somebody comes in and plays the moderator or the facilitator of the discussion to sort of work through whatever that situation is.
Sure.
Great, right? And we've done that before. We have a few people, right, that are
We're able to
good
rely
friends,
on.
good advisors, business acquaintances that can help
cross-check
give
you.
us some additional information to get through a disagreement on a particular topic.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know, ideas.
No, I think it's great, but I'd say the big thing really is just don't try to avoid conflict. I think that's just a huge thing that I think if we tried to avoid it, like, and I know there's a lot of family dynamics out there that are like this. Like, say you and I got into our passionate Italian disagreement, and then we never said anything about it, and then we just tried to work like normal.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
It's not going to work. I mean, it could until it happens again, and then whatever. So, like, you just have to make sure that you work through that. And I know that we both made an effort to make sure that I'm like, let's talk about that and what we did. And then, but I think it was different too, because that was different than even our personal relationship. So I think that is another thing that made us closer, is that we learned a whole new way to connect, even like emotionally, through problem solving and critical thinking, that I think directly impacted our personal relationship as well. So I think that's cool.
Awesome.
I have something else I want to talk about.
Uh-oh.
It's good.
Okay.
I just think it's interesting when you work with family, you see how human a family member is.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that part's really eye-opening, that I didn't expect to happen, because I know specifically for me, and maybe I'm sure you've viewed me differently as well now than obviously just your daughter, because you've seen me in a different role. I've now seen you in a different role. And I think I was not expecting that, and I'm thankful for this. But I think you grow up as a daughter looking at your dad as just like, dad. Not that I don't think you are like that now. But when you work together and you see that you are capable of mistakes,
right,
or you're capable of messing up, or kind of you see a different side to you that I would never have seen just being your daughter.
right.
And there's a humanness that I really appreciate in this dynamic, that you are just a like regular dude, like, even though you're my, but like, even though that you're my dad, you're still a regular person. You're a human. You're just a regular human, and you have flaws, and you have things that you're really great at, and you have things that you're not really great at, and you have things. But I think when you're a daughter, though, you look at your dad as like, maybe this is really hard for you to realize that I see you as someone who's not perfect, but you do. You look at the person as they can do no wrong. They're just their dad. They're a perfect person. They're human. He's perfect. Yeah. But do you see what I'm saying?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying.
You see them as this flawed, that you see them as a human now, and you're like, wow. And I think it gives you this grace for them that maybe you didn't have before. I think it gives me grace for someone that I would have just seen one way before, that now I see another way. So I don't know if you.
Nice.
Okay, he likes it.
Yeah.
Good. But I do. I think if people can figure out how to work with family, and you really try, and you really, really work hard, and you try to work through the conflicts, and you try to work through the dynamics that exist in the family, you try to work that, it like, there was a time that I was like, oh, you drive me nuts. But now I know, and I'm dreading the day that you will eventually want to go into full retirement, and you won't want to be around the way that you're around. And not that you won't want to.
If you're having fun, it's not work, right?
Sure. He'll do it till in the grave.
Right.
You'll be in your casket and I'll be like, Steve, what are we doing with our
And
numbers?
then if I screw up, then you get to fire me, right?
Exactly.
Oh, my.
Oh, that would be hard. But I just think of now that I'm in a place that I'm like, how would I replace in the event that if you weren't around? Which it's funny how you can make such a drastic switch. So I'm appreciative of that.
Yeah.
Do you have any more topics before we finish this up?
There is a whole, this is for another day,
Okay.
right? There's a whole financial piece to family members working together.
What
Right?
do you-
Parent, child, brother, sister, dad, daughter, right? Financially, when you sit back and you kind of think about general principles, one would be, how do you, over a lifetime, how do you keep, I always say, keep the money in the family, right? Keep the money in the family. Why would I give money to somebody else when I can keep it in the family?
Mm-hmm.
Now, regardless of kids growing up, getting married, living in different states, whatever, that mentality still works,
I think
right?
that's our Italian in us.
And it's like, okay, so why would you want to work with a family member? Well, there's financial benefits
I see what you're saying.
associated to this as well. Now, of course, we'll bring in the CPAs and those folks when you want to talk about the financial benefits of family members working together.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's some things behind the scenes that work out very well, right?
Yeah.
When they say hire your kid,
Yeah.
right? Why pay him allowance and everything else? Hire him in your company, right? There's a lot of things there that play into how do you keep it in the family versus flowing out to others.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting discussion,
I think that would.
right?
Yeah.
But we'll
that would
get
be
the
great.
CPAs and them
Yeah.
talking because I can't officially give
We
financial
can't give
advice.
financial
Right?
advice.
Can't do that.
I'm not absolutely. You don't want me to.
No.
No.
All right. What else?
But this was good. Yeah, I think there's other topics that I know we're going to want to talk about in the future. I know customer service is something, so be on the lookout for that. Dad/Steve is very passionate about customer service. So we're going to talk about that in a future episode on how things have changed so much over the years.
Old school, new school of customer service.
Yes,
Oh
we're going to talk
we have
about
stories.
that. We could talk about a couple other things that we talked about today. But is there anything else on your list you just want to scan quick
I
and
don't
see?
know. Let's see.
If you have anything you want to make sure you really touch on.
Dynamics. We touched on who's the boss.
We did.
Right? Who's the boss? The forming, storming.
The protectiveness of things we touched on.
I mean, the trust aspect, I don't know. I guess we don't even think about that from the sense of it's just inherent. But I imagine in some family dynamics, there's a question of can trust truly be there? I don't know. I'm not sure how to deal with that if that were an issue.
Yeah.
I don't even think about that.
I would say if you are in a dynamic, this is what I would think that I would do. Like if I was in a dynamic that I felt like I couldn't trust the individual, there's two roles that person plays for you. So it's like, are we giving one up or do we have to give both up or how are we going to save both of them? And I think if there's whoever is the offender or not of the lack of trust, I think you would really have to take that outside of work and outside of the relationship and work through that somewhere because you're not people to be that. I mean, you'd have to be a psychologist. I just would think that you would really have to have a lot of skills that I don't think a lot of everyday people would have to be able to kind of work through how that occurred, how that happened, and then how to move forward.
Sure.
That's something that I think is outside of most people's capabilities, but you can't leave it. My big thing would be that you cannot leave it. Like you wouldn't want to leave lack of trust with anybody, like because it just festers. But good, yeah.
Just maybe as we're wrapping up here, I think it's, for me, and I would assume for many, whether it's a mother, father, having the ability to work with your child, I think it's awesome, right? And sharing information that you've acquired over, 40, 50 years, fantastic. So I wouldn't have it any other way. Right?
Cool.
Yeah.
Would you recommend it to other people?
Yeah, actually. You know, I can quote you all kinds of statistics and things about baby boomers and are they prepared for retirement and those kinds of things, right? I mean, and think of the baby boom generation of now they talk about lack of workers.
Yeah.
Right? Companies can't hire enough good people. Well, I can tell you as a fact, there are plenty of 60-year-old and older people that have that knowledge and capability. And I can imagine that there's a tremendous amount of them that would love to do more than maybe sit around the house and not be doing a hell of a lot, right?
Yeah.
And if somehow can you tap into that knowledge, even if they can do part-time gigs, you know, helping a company in their capabilities, I think they would love it.
It's
I think there's an
literally like the
opportunity.
movie The Intern.
There's an opportunity here, right?
It is. And I used to say that when I was recruiting a lot, that when they would, because ageism is such a thing in recruiting. Oh my gosh, especially in construction. People are always worried about those that are getting too old to be in a role from a physical standpoint and just whatever.
Sure.
They always are really worried about, and that's a lot of the recruiting that I did, obviously, was in construction. And they would worry about that. So I started coming up with the concept that I was like, what if we took someone who was not physically able and matched them with someone who was physically able? Like, let's
Sure.
stop trying to pretend that it's not a thing. Let's just name it as it is. And we take someone who's 60, 70, 80, whatever age that it is, that they're on their way out to retirement, but they want to keep working.
Right.
Why get rid of
They
that
wanna
beautiful,
feel useful.
correct? Like, why get rid of that and count them out just because they can't physically swing a hammer like they used to? Why don't you match them with someone else who can and navigate that? Because we're running out of people to be able to hire for these roles.
And there's a I'll call it psychological aspect here too, that I would imagine there are a tremendous amount of people that are in fear of what are they going to do when they can't, quote, work any longer, right?
Sure.
Right? What am I going to do? There's a lot of people who don't know when they talk about retirement. So I kind of say there's a transition model here, which, you know, as somebody is sort of done with what they've typically been doing for the last 30, 40 years, is there a transition into what retirement may look like?
Yeah.
And why not consulting and working for a company, particularly a family member, right? I mean, there's some opportunities here that I kind of say, interesting, right? That we're ahead of the curve, right?
We are ahead of the curve. And I would say we're even more ahead of the curve because if you're someone who's listening to this podcast and you are maybe considering selling your business or moving on to something else, there's a lot of CEOs that we talk to from a personal branding aspect that we are turning them into a speaker or a consultant or something like that, and they need someone to help them build that business because maybe it's been so long since they have, and it's a whole new world now than it was when they first started their business. And so how can we help them?
How can we help market them, brand them,
and turn them into something else? Yeah.
Whatever that may be.
So
And,
this is a plug that we want to help you with things like that. So feel free to contact us no matter where you're at.
Awesome.
But thank you so much for coming on today. I think we could have talked for so much longer. But if anybody maybe wants to reach out to you from what they heard today, how would you want them to contact you? Maybe through LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn.
Send you a message? Okay.
I mean, I have no problem unless the boss does that they can send it to my email, right?
I would say
that's up to
no on here. Yeah. From just a safety and security
LinkedIn is probably
standpoint,
the best way to
LinkedIn.
go.
Yeah. Find Steve Pucci on LinkedIn. You can always get to my page and find him. But yeah, I would say maybe contact you on LinkedIn if they connected with you in any way or they want to ask you questions about it or just say, hey, good job. But thank you so much for being here today. We really enjoyed it. And you're definitely going to come back for a couple more episodes in the future. So
All right.
thanks so much.
Thank you.